Alright, hello Andre. I'm recording on the 1st of the 19th for homework number 2. Alright, so for part 1 of this homework, it was creating the structure for the position and color, and then changing the points of the star to different colors, which creates a gradient effect. So I'm going to run that now. Scroll down while it's still loading so that you can see the... oh, there it is. So, as you can see, all of the points are different colors, and it goes gradient towards the center. Alright. So that was part 1, and where is the insert? Or the... there it is. Input elements, position, and color, with it jumping ahead to find the correct position of the color. Alright, on to part 2. For part 2, it was a similar thing, except we had to add extra vertices because the colors were different for those vertices, as you can see here. So, very similar, just really more of an exercise. That will take a moment to load, so while that is loading, I will talk about part 3. So part 3 was a little different. Had to swap around the positions of the here in the header file. Had to swap around the position for the color and position of the vertex. So in order to get it to work, because just switching those two things would cause it not to draw anything, because it's receiving the incorrect information for all of the points and vertices for their colors and their locations. It was receiving the inverse of that, so you just simply had to switch it all around, including, if I can find it, the inverse. Where is... here it is. So here you can see part 2. So for part 3, yeah, so if you swap the position of color and position in the input elements and swap all of the different components here, you can essentially switch around all of the different things you would want to give to the shader without changing the shader directly. Because it can all be done on this side, as long as you keep the input consistent with the shape of the structure that you're giving it. Then, finally, part 4 was the question where you had to create your own array of color, your own buffer. And so that included creating an actual new buffer, creating a structure to contain the different colors from the buffer, creating a new shader, or altering an existing shader, really, to accept the new, to be able to distinguish between the two different colors in the buffer. And the end result is a multicolored star with different colors gotten from the same buffer. Alright, and onto the further works questions. So part 1 was the difference between a constant buffer and a shader constant. Shader constants are the individual things. They would be the individual parts of, in this case it would be a float 4 for the color, and it would be each of those in the array, whereas the actual array itself, that is the buffer, although works slightly differently than part 2. Adding this component will only change the triangle, because the triangle is the only thing that is being passed through that pipeline. The background is not being passed through the pipeline when you are simply altering the shader that is only being applied to those, to the triangle, to the vectors of the triangle. All right, so that is all for my recording for this homework. Thank you and have a good night.